I've been growing kale for 11 years. Every single spring, I buy transplants, prepare the bed, plant them, baby them through summer, and watch them bolt and die when the heat hits. Then I do it all over again. Last year, a 91-year-old woman at my local garden club handed me a cutting from a plant in her yard. She said her mother planted it in 1987. It was still producing greens. Same plant. 37 years. No replanting, no seed purchases, no fuss. It's called tree collards. It tastes like kale crossed with broccoli. It produces year-round in mild climates, and you cannot buy it at any major nursery in America. I want to tell you why. Tree collards go by a few names. Walking stick kale, tree kale, perennial brassica. Technically, they're Brassica oleracea, the same species as regular kale, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage. Same species, completely different behavior. Regular kale is a biennial grown as an annual. You plant it, it grows leaves for one season, then it flowers, sets seed, and dies. You start over, every year. That's how the nursery industry likes it. Annual plants mean annual customers. Tree collards don't do that. They grow into woody-stemmed plants 4 to 8 feet tall. They produce large blue-green leaves continuously. They don't bolt in summer the way regular kale does. They don't die after flowering. They just keep going, year after year after year. Some documented tree-collared plants in California are over 20 years old and still producing harvestable leaves every week. There are reports from the United Kingdom of perennial brassicas maintained for even longer. Plants passed down through generations like fruit trees. Not like vegetables. The question isn't whether tree collards work. They obviously work. The question is, why nobody sells them? The answer is simpler than you'd think, and it has nothing to do with the plant's quality. Tree collards don't grow true from seed. You can't put seeds in a packet and sell them. They're propagated from cuttings. You take a stem section, root it in water or soil, and it becomes a new plant. This is how they've been shared for decades, person to person, gardener to gardener, neighbor to neighbor. For a nursery or seed company, this is a terrible product. You can't mass produce it like seed packets. You can't ship it cheaply. You can't patent a cutting that anyone can take from an existing plant. And worst of all, once a customer has one plant, they never need to buy another. They can make unlimited copies themselves just by snipping a branch and sticking it in dirt. Compare that to annual kale. A gardener buys seeds or transplants every single spring. Multiply that by 20 years, and one customer generates 20 transactions. A tree collard generates one. Maybe 0 if they got their cutting from a friend. So, tree collards were never suppressed or banned. They were simply ignored. No profit motive means no promotion. No promotion means no awareness. No awareness means a generation of gardeners who've never heard of a perennial kale that outlives their dog. Nutritionally, tree collards are comparable to regular kale. They're in the same species, so the nutrient profile is similar. High in vitamins A, C, and K. Good source of calcium and iron. Rich in fiber. Strong antioxidant content. But here's where the practical advantage becomes enormous, especially for older gardeners or anyone who wants to simplify their life. Regular kale requires bed preparation every year, soil amendment, transplanting, or direct seeding, pest management during the vulnerable seedling stage. Flea beetles, cabbage worms, aphids, all attack young kale plants. You fight these battles every single season. Then summer comes, the kale bolts, and it's over. In most of America, you get maybe 5 to 6 months of harvest from annual kale if you time it well. Tree collards skip all of that. The plant is already established. The woody stem ditters many pests that attack young tender growth. You walk outside, pick leaves, and go cook dinner. That's the entire process. No bed prep, no transplanting, no battling seedlings through spring cold snaps. No watching your crop bolt in July. For anyone over 50, and I say this respectfully because I hear from this audience constantly, the physical labor of annual gardening adds up. Bending, kneeling, hauling compost, starting seeds indoors under lights. Tree collards eliminate most of that labor. The plant does the work. You just harvest. One woman wrote to me and said she stopped vegetable gardening at 73 because her knees couldn't take it anymore. Then she got a tree collard cutting from a community garden. She put it in a large pot on her patio. 3 years later, she picks leaves twice a week without bending down because the plant is chest height. She calls it her retirement garden. That's what a perennial vegetable actually means in real life. Not a concept, not a theory. Less pain, less money, more food. Let me tell you how to grow tree collards, because it's almost embarrassingly easy. You start with a cutting. You cannot start from seed. Remember, they don't come true from seed. You need a stem section from an existing plant. The cutting should be about 8 to 12 inches long, taken from a healthy stem that's starting to get woody. Don't use the soft green tip. That's too tender and will wilt. Use the section below it where the stem feels firm. Strip the lower leaves. Leave 2 or 3 leaves at the top. Put the bare stem end in a glass of water on a windowsill. Change the water every few days. In 2 to 4 weeks, you'll see roots forming. Once roots are an inch or 2 long, plant it in soil. Alternatively, dip the cut end in rooting hormone and stick it directly into moist potting soil. Cover with a plastic bag to hold humidity. Roots develop in 3 to 6 weeks. Plant in full sun to partial shade. Tree collards actually appreciate some afternoon shade in hot climates. They're cool weather brassicas at heart. Rich soil is good, but not critical. Water regularly the first year while the root system establishes. After that, they're remarkably drought tolerant for a leafy green. As the plant grows, it develops a woody trunk. This is normal. This is what makes it perennial. When it gets tall and leggy, and it will, cut the main stem back to about 2 to 3 feet. The plant will branch out from below the cut and become bushier, producing more leaves on more stems. This is the key maintenance trick. Regular pruning keeps the plant productive and manageable. Without pruning, it'll grow tall, top-heavy, and eventually fall over. In zones 8 through 11, tree collards grow year-round outdoors. Below zone 8, you can grow them in large containers and bring them inside during freezing weather, just like you would a potted fig tree. They won't produce much over winter indoors, but they'll survive and explode with growth when warm weather returns. The one thing tree collards don't handle well is sustained hard frost. A light freeze is fine. A week of 20-degree nights will likely kill the above-ground growth, but established plants sometimes resprout from the root crown if the freeze isn't too severe. Cooking tree collards is identical to cooking regular collard greens or kale. If you know how to cook one, you already know how to cook the other. Strip the leaves from the thick center rib. The rib is tough. Compost it or save it for stock. Roll a stack of leaves into a tight bundle and slice into thin ribbons. This is called a chiffonade, and it's the simplest way to prep any large-leafed green. Sauté ribbons in olive oil with garlic and a pinch of red pepper flakes. 3 to 4 minutes on medium heat. Season with salt and a squeeze of lemon. Done. This takes less time than driving to the grocery store to buy a bag of pre-washed kale. Add raw leaves to smoothies. They blend smoother than regular kale because the leaf texture is slightly softer. You won't taste them behind banana and berries. Throw a handful into any soup during the last 5 minutes of cooking. Bean soup, chicken soup, potato soup. Tree collard leaves add body and nutrition without changing the flavor profile you already love. My personal favorite is the simplest. Tear leaves into pieces, toss with olive oil, salt, and a little Parmesan. Spread on a baking sheet. Bake at 350 for 10 to 12 minutes until the edges are crispy. Homemade kale chips. Except these came from a plant you'll never have to replant. Here's the real conversation nobody's having. Americans spend roughly $370 billion on groceries annually. Leafy greens are one of the most frequently purchased produce categories. Kale alone went from an obscure garnish to a billion-dollar market in about a decade. Every dollar of that is annual spending. Every bag of kale purchased represents a plant that died after one season. Tree collards could reduce a family's leafy green spending to nearly zero for 20 years from a single free cutting. No seeds, no transplants. No weekly grocery trips for greens. One plant on a patio, in a raised bed, or in the corner of a yard. You won't hear this from nurseries because there's nothing for them to sell. You won't see it in seed catalogs because there are no seeds to catalog. You won't find it promoted by the agricultural industry because a plant that propagates for free and never needs replanting is the opposite of a product. But gardeners share. That's what gardeners have always done. And tree collards have survived for generations, not through commerce, but through exactly that. One person handing another person a cutting and saying, "Try this. If you want a tree collared cutting, here's where to look." Check local garden clubs and community gardens. Older members often have established plants and are happy to share. Online communities on Facebook and Reddit frequently offer cuttings by mail for a few dollars to cover shipping. Some small specialty nurseries carry them seasonally. Search for tree collards, walking stick kale, or perennial brassica. Once you have one plant, you'll never need to source another. Every pruning session gives you new cuttings. Give them to your neighbors. Give them to your kids. Pass along a plant that might outlive you. If this video helped you, subscribe. Every week I cover one crop that the nursery industry doesn't sell, the seed catalogs don't feature, and your grocery store pretends doesn't exist. Next week, a grain that has 40% more protein than wheat. It fed the largest empire in the Western Hemisphere, and when the Spanish conquered that empire, they burned every field of it they could find. 500 years later, it grows wild in American ditches, and the USDA calls it a weed. That's next week. Subscribe so it shows up in your feed.